June 7th, 1944, Omaha Beach, Normandy, France. The supply officer tallied the impossible numbers scratched onto a water-damaged notepad. 160,000 men landed, 0 functioning ports. Ammunition expenditure already exceeded projections by 40%. Lieutenant Colonel James Reardon, Deputy Chief of Supply for 1st Army, studied the chaos stretching across the blood-stained sand. Mountains of equipment scattered across tidal flats. Trucks half submerged in surf. Fuel drums bobbing in the waves. What none of them knew was that this logistical disaster on the beaches was about to transform into the most sophisticated supply operation in military history, one that would force the German High Command to fundamentally revise their understanding of American industrial power. The Germans had studied American logistics and found them wanting. Since the North Africa campaign in 1942, Wehrmacht intelligence officers had documented what they considered fatal American weaknesses. The Americans were soft, they concluded, dependent on luxuries. Their supply lines stretched absurdly far to deliver non-essentials: coffee, candy bars, fresh uniforms, cigarettes. German soldiers could fight on black bread and sausage. American troops demanded 3 hot meals daily. General Günther Blumentritt, Chief of Staff to Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, had written in April 1944, "The American logistical tale is grotesquely bloated. They cannot possibly sustain operations far from established ports. Their men are motorized civilians, not soldiers. When their supply system collapses, as it must, their offensive capability will evaporate." The German assessment seemed reasonable based on European military tradition. Napoleon had famously stated that an army marches on its stomach, but European armies had learned to march on very little. German logistics doctrine emphasized living off conquered territory, requisition food locally, repair equipment in field workshops, accept casualties from malnutrition and disease as inevitable costs of war. The Wehrmacht operated on the principle that soldiers were expendable resources to be consumed in pursuit of strategic objectives. Admiral Bertram Ramsay's naval planners had calculated the mathematical nightmare before D-Day. Operation Overlord would require landing 1 million men in Normandy within 3 weeks. Each soldier needed 30 pounds of supplies daily. That totaled 30,000 tons of material every 24 hours, delivered across open beaches until major ports could be captured and repaired. No military force in history had attempted sustained operations at this scale without functioning harbors. The Mulberry harbors represented one solution: 2 artificial harbors, each the size of Dover Harbor, constructed from concrete caissons and floating piers. Installation began June 7th, but a catastrophic storm on June 19th destroyed the American Mulberry at Omaha Beach completely. The British Mulberry at Gold Beach survived, but could handle only limited tonnage. The supply crisis everyone had feared was now inevitable, except it wasn't. Technical Service Chief Brigadier General Edmund Levy had spent 2 years developing the system that would make beach logistics viable. The key was standardization, taken to extremes that seemed absurd to European military minds. Every item shipped to Normandy was catalogued, containerized, and tracked through a system that used early punch card data processing. Quartermasters could locate any item, from tank treads to toilet paper, within hours. But standardization meant more than cataloging. It meant redesigning how supplies were packaged, stored, and moved. Ammunition came in weatherproof containers that could survive immersion in seawater. Rations were packed in standardized crates that fit precisely on standard pallets, moved by standard forklifts, loaded into standard trucks. Nothing was left to improvisation. The scale of preparation defied comprehension. 3 million tons of supplies, pre-positioned in Britain before D-Day. 54 million ration packs. 144 million gallons of gasoline. 500 million cigarettes. The cigarettes particularly baffled German analysts. Why waste shipping space on tobacco? The answer revealed a fundamental philosophical divide. American command understood that morale was a logistical concern. Well-fed, comfortable troops fought better. Exhausted, demoralized soldiers became combat ineffective even without physical casualties. Master Sergeant Raymond Volpe had worked in supplies since North Africa, learning through brutal trial and error what worked in combat logistics. Volpe understood that supply officers weren't rear-echelon parasites. They were combat multipliers. Every hot meal delivered to frontline troops meant men who could fight another day without collapsing from exhaustion. Every clean uniform meant fewer soldiers evacuated with trench foot or dysentery. The Germans think we're soft, Volpe explained to new supply clerks arriving in July. They see us eating hot food and think we can't survive hardship. But here's what they don't understand. A well-supplied soldier fights at 100% effectiveness. A hungry, sick, exhausted soldier fights at maybe 50%. We're not feeding them steak because we're soft. We're feeding them steak because it's more efficient than replacing casualties. Volpe had revolutionized frontline supply distribution through innovations that seemed obvious in retrospect, but required someone to actually implement them. Mobile kitchens that could keep pace with advancing infantry, portable showers that reduced skin infections by 80%, laundry units that provided clean uniforms weekly. These weren't luxuries, they were force multipliers that kept soldiers combat effective far longer than traditional European logistical doctrine allowed. The Red Ball Express began operation August 25, 1944, as Allied armies broke out from Normandy. The plan was audacious. Dedicate entire highway routes exclusively to supply trucks. No civilian traffic. No military traffic, except supply convoys. Trucks would run 24 hours daily, hauling supplies from Normandy beaches to armies advancing toward Germany. 6,000 trucks, 75% driven by African American soldiers of segregated transport companies. The trucks ran in continuous convoys, spaced at 60-yard intervals, averaging 200 miles per day. At peak operation, Red Ball Express delivered 12,000 tons of supplies daily, hauling material across distances that European military planners insisted made sustained operations impossible. Lieutenant Colonel John Ballard commanded one of the Red Ball Express truck companies. His unit, the 582nd Quartermaster Truck Company, ran convoys from Cherbourg to forward supply dumps near the German border. The operation demanded precision that matched any combat unit. Trucks maintained strict schedules. Breakdowns were repaired immediately, or vehicles were pushed aside. Drivers worked 18-hour shifts, sleeping in 4-hour rotations. Accidents were frequent. Enemy air attacks were rare, but devastating when they occurred. Yet the tonnage kept flowing. The Germans couldn't believe it, Ballard recalled in post-war interviews. Their intelligence kept reporting our supply lines as overextended and vulnerable. But we just kept delivering, every day, rain or shine. We had mechanics positioned every 50 miles, fuel dumps every 100 miles. If a truck broke down, another took its place within 30 minutes. It wasn't heroic. It was industrial efficiency applied to warfare. German commanders watched American supply operations with growing disbelief. Oberst Dietrich von Koltitz, military governor of Paris before its liberation, wrote, "We calculated that the Americans could not sustain offensive operations beyond their beachhead without major ports. We were wrong. They simply brought the port with them. Thousands of trucks moving in organized chaos that somehow delivered everything their armies needed." The German logistical system, by contrast, was collapsing. The Wehrmacht relied heavily on railroads, vulnerable to air attack. Their motor transport depended on captured vehicles with non-standardized parts. A German supply officer might need 17 different wrenches to repair trucks in a single motor pool because they came from factories in Germany, France, Czechoslovakia, and Italy, all using different specifications. American supply officers needed one set of standardized tools because all their trucks came from 3 American manufacturers building to identical specifications. By September 1944, German armies in France were literally starving, while American forces 800 miles from their supply bases still received 3 hot meals daily. The contrast was stark. German soldiers, surrendering, often commented on the amount and quality of American rations. One German officer captured near Metz stated, "We knew we had lost when we saw that your frontline troops had fresh bread and coffee. We had been eating horse meat and moldy potatoes for weeks." The fuel crisis demonstrated American logistical superiority most dramatically. Operation Market Garden in September 1944 required enormous fuel supplies. American engineers constructed the first pipeline under the English Channel in mere weeks. Petroleum lines eventually stretched from Cherbourg to Germany, delivering 300,000 gallons daily by November 1944. German forces, fighting on their own territory with intact refineries, suffered from chronic fuel shortages because Allied air attacks had destroyed their distribution infrastructure. Technical Sergeant Charles MacDonald worked in the ordnance section responsible for maintaining tanks and artillery. The German approach to maintenance was fundamentally different from American methods. German tanks were over-engineered masterpieces. The Tiger tank was superior to any American tank in direct combat. But a Tiger that threw a track required specialized parts shipped from Germany, assuming the part existed and transportation was available. Repair could take weeks. An American Sherman tank used standardized parts available from any supply depot. Repairs rarely took more than 48 hours. The Germans built better individual weapons, MacDonald explained, but we built a better system. A Tiger might kill 3 Shermans before being destroyed, but we could replace those 3 Shermans within a week. The Tiger would still be waiting for parts 2 months later. That's how you win wars. Not with superior weapons, but with superior logistics. The Quartermaster Corps expanded to become the largest technical service in the European theater. At peak strength, 500,000 soldiers worked in supply, maintenance, and transportation. That represented 1 supply soldier for every 3 combat soldiers, a ratio that shocked European military observers, but proved devastatingly effective. Those 500,000 supply troops meant American combat units fought at near full effectiveness throughout the campaign, while German units steadily degraded from inadequate supply. Medical supply demonstrated another American innovation that baffled German commanders. American armies carried complete field hospitals that could perform complex surgery within miles of the front lines. Whole blood was flown from America and transfused within 24 hours of wounding. Penicillin, a wonder drug unavailable to German forces, was distributed to every aid station. American wounded had a 90% survival rate if they reached medical care alive. German wounded often died from infections that American doctors considered easily treatable. The cumulative effect was strategic. By December 1944, American armies in Europe were consuming 800,000 tons of supplies monthly, delivered across supply lines stretching from American factories to German frontiers. German forces, fighting on their own territory with interior lines, were receiving barely enough supplies to sustain defensive operations. The industrial equation had become mathematically decisive. Post-war analysis revealed what German commanders had fundamentally misunderstood. American logistical waste on coffee, cigarettes, and fresh food wasn't waste. It was investment in sustained combat effectiveness. A soldier who ate hot meals, received his mail regularly, and had clean uniforms fought better and longer than a soldier who existed on minimum rations. The soft Americans had calculated that logistics was warfare, just as important as tactics and firepower. The final accounting was strategically decisive, despite appearing mundane. 0 major American units became combat ineffective from supply shortages. German units routinely fought at 50% effectiveness or less from inadequate supply. American soldiers received an average of 4,500 calories daily. German soldiers averaged 2,200 calories. American tanks averaged 90% operational readiness. German tanks averaged 20%. These percentages represented victory more than any tactical genius. In the museums today, German weapons like the Tiger tank and MG-42 machine gun are displayed as masterpieces of engineering. They were. But wars are not won by superior individual weapons. They are won by superior systems that keep adequate weapons functioning continuously in the hands of well-supplied soldiers. The German commanders, who scoffed at American supply chains, learned this lesson too late. America had proven that an army could indeed march on its stomach, and when that stomach was properly fed, the army was unstoppable.